bullet your entitled hands could ever reach. Generations and generations of pain, fear, and anxiety. Equality is walking without intuition, saying the protector and the killer is wearing the same uniform. The revolution is not televised. Media perception is forced down the throats of closed minds, so it's lies in the headlines and generations of supremacy resulting in your ignorant, privileged eyes. We breathe the same and we bleed the same, but still we don't see the same. Be thankful we are God-fearing because we do not seek revenge. We seek justice. We are past fear. We are fed up eating your shit because you think your so-called black friend validates your wokeness and erases your racism. That kind of uncomfortable conversation is too hard for your trust fund pockets to swallow. To swallow the strange fruit hanging from my family tree because of your audacity to say all men are created equal in the eyes of God, but disparage a man based on the color of his skin. Do not say you do not see color. When you see us, we can't breathe.
Good evening to all. Thank you all for joining the IPESD and the Greater Rochester PLTI community-led conversation. My name is Luba Alvarez, and I am the site coordinator for the Greater Rochester PLTI site.
And I am the director of the Institute for Poverty Studies, which is located in the Public Administration Department at SUNY Brockport. So excited to co-host this with PLTI.
So we thank you all for being part of this conversation that we feel that is a very important conversation that is current right now in our country. As you all know, with the recent murder of George Floyd, and what has been happening with police and this community conversations and the protests, we felt that it was very needed that we have a community-led conversation. We really wanted to have this opportunity to sit down together and to really hear different perspectives from one another, from those in our local community, and as well as what national is saying as well. So to learn more, what is the Greater Rochester PLTI? The Greater Rochester PLTI, as many of you might know, is a parent group here in Rochester, New York. We are a local initiative of national parent leadership that is an evidence-based program that's designed to increase parent involvement in the community's issues. We are a group of people that have begun in Connecticut in 1992 in the Monroe County-based Early Childhood Development Initiative work, and then we brought it here to Rochester in 2012. Our mission is to help to build bridges and advocacy skills to support parents in coming and becoming leading advocates for children in our community. And Steve will tell you more about what the IPSED is about.
Thanks, Luva. IPSED is a institute that's community focused. We obviously have connections within the university, but our mission is to create a growing economy in the region and mitigate the impact of poverty on citizens and communities. So for us as trainers of nonprofit leaders and government leaders and business and healthcare, we essentially train people how to operate the system. And IPSED's focused on getting out and generating community voice and connecting our graduate students to the ideas that are in the community for how to improve the community. And so putting the resources of the college to work to bring that community voice into our system as much as we can, because that's really the missing piece for why we don't always see the impact that we want. And
so we want to make sure that we acknowledge our panelists and special guests in the room today. We were kind of doing it a little bit earlier, but I just wanted to make sure that we do it with all of our guests that are here and participants who are listening in. So let me go down the list. We have Ms. LaShonda Leslie Smith, who is in our space. She is here from the Connected Communities. And so LaShonda, if you would just raise your hand or just even wave, that would be good for everybody who I'm announcing their names. That'll be helpful. We have Simeon Bannister here from the Black Agenda Group. We have Jensen McNair. He's a Commander of Staff Services from Monroe County Sheriff Office. We have Sean Brown from the Teen Empowerment. We have Stevie Vargas from the Citizen Action. We have Danette Campbell Bell. She's a Senior Program Officer at the Greater Rochester Health Foundation. We have Beatrice LeBron, who is the BOE of the Commissioner and a social worker. We have Brian Kaur, who is here from Nicole. And we also have Melanie Blow, who will be here. And she is from Stop Abuse Now. So welcome to everyone. We also have facilitators in the space, and they are ran by our PLTI parent leaders. And we have Rosalind Walker, we have Leslie Knox, and Jessica Gustavo, and Ricardo Adams. So now I'll turn it back to Steve, who will kind of start framing the conversation and how we will lead into this whole event.
Thank you, Luva. We started working together maybe a month ago around particularly the issues of alternatives to policing and wanting to have a broader conversation, not just about what is going on in our community with respect to community and police relations, but really looking at community voice, youth empowerment, right? What are some of the different systems and important aspects of the community conversation other than just police relations that really are about empowerment and progress and really stamping what Black Lives Matter means. Well, we wanted to talk about what defunding the police means, what could come next, why we're having that conversation, and to do that collaboratively with public safety, because there's a lot of innovative models out there for police reform. And so what we wanted to do to kick off tonight's conversation is to have Brian Kaur from the National Association for Civilian Oversight and Law Enforcement to kind of give us a sense of what is happening nationally. He's speaking all over the country and is really in touch with what's going on around police oversight and accountability, but also to talk to us about some innovations in alternative public safety models. So we're excited for that opportunity to kick off the community conversation and hear from everybody out there. So Brian, the virtual floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Steve. And first of all, I really want to thank all of you for who've been organizing this, who have shown up to be part of this tonight, and for including me. And I'll just say very quickly that I first heard of PLTI a couple years ago, and I met Patty Keck of Connecticut at a parenting conference in Western Massachusetts. And I also just note that I used to work for Northeast Action, which supported Citizen Action of New York and other organizations. So I come out of really an activist background, an organizing background, but I've worked for government now since 2008, which is how I originally met Steve. And I'm really glad to be here, really glad that people in your community are exploring these ideas. So NACOL is a national organization. It's, as the name says, we are an association of people involved in civilian oversight of police and law enforcement agencies. And it's everything from staff like myself and directors of civilian oversight groups to, excuse me, board members, law enforcement officers who are, excuse me, actively working. I don't know why this is happening, but I'll persevere. Excuse me. And basically, I'm sorry, this is unusual. we come together to support each other in doing this work, but also to help communities that are looking at creating civilian oversight or revamping civilian oversight. And we have about 1,500 people who are part of our association. We have about 200 communities around the country that have some form of oversight, and over half of them are members of NACOL. More are coming up all the time. And one of those communities is actually Rochester. So, but I'm so much I want to say, but I want to take a moment to kind of frame what I see as what's happening at the national conversation. And in short, a lot of the dialogue I'm hearing as I talk to people around the country and people right here in Cambridge is it reform or is it revolution? Do we think we can fix policing, fix law enforcement, improve public safety, make it better, more responsive? Or do we think that the system is essentially not just broken, but rotten to its core? It's essentially racist and oppressive and just needs to be overthrown. And that's kind of a caricature, but those are kind of the positions that I'm hearing a lot of people saying. And I think one of the things I want to emphasize is to try to break out of the binary. This idea that things have this essential nature and we either accept them or we get rid of them. I think a lot of it comes down to this idea that things have failed and aren't working, and so we need something new. And if you think about our society at this moment, I'm hearing that from people talking about the federal government, local government. And I think for me personally, and for the people that I know in the work of civilian oversight, I mean, we do this work because we do believe that the system can help people. And I'm an inside-outside person. You know, I used to work as an activist. Now I work in government. I think that we need both. I don't think it's an either or. You need activism to push systems in government, but you also need government to implement changes as long as we have government. And it seems like that's probably going to be here for a while, though sometimes I wonder these days. And so this idea of not feeding into this narrative of there's two sides is really important to me. And one of the ways I think about this when I talk to people is change can't wait, but sustainable change takes time. And again, I don't see those as contradictory. Like, we desperately need change. And I'm sure the other speakers are going to speak very passionately and very clearly about the need for deep systemic change. And it also takes time. So we have to be active, we have to be confronting injustice, we have to be having conversations, proposing legislation, doing things out of community, and we also have to recognize that it's taken us hundreds of years to get to this point. So it's going to take us a long time to do the work, to continue to get out of it, and to keep getting out of it, because there's a lot of momentum and a lot of inertia, and it's easy to backslide. So I do want to say a little bit more about sort of the national scene. So as I mentioned, you know, there are about 200 civilian oversight agencies around the country. There are about 18,000 law enforcement agencies. They're all different sizes, different purposes, different standards, different history. They're in different kind of communities with different histories. And so there's a huge variation. And so similarly with oversight, there's a lot of variation. There are three kind of basic models of civilian oversight we talk about. There are civilian review boards that look at completed investigations and make some determinations, maybe make specific recommendations. There are investigatory models where the civilian oversight entity, the agency, the department actually receives complaints and does its own investigations and makes determinations about whether the police officers involved followed policy and procedure, was there misconduct? And the third major model are inspectors general or auditors. They're really looking more at systemic issues. And then there are lots of hybrids. We've increasingly seen civilian oversight move toward models where you have either multiple agencies or, more commonly, one agency that does a number of those things. They may review things coming out of internal affairs. They may be doing systemic reviews of policies and procedures or trends. And I'll just mention that Rochester is one of those unique hybrid models. It's actually a very interesting model where you have an alternative dispute resolution entity that manages most of the work. And you know, as I say, they're all different, they're all over the map. So we're all trying to do the best we can to make positive change. And then in terms of, watching my clock here, alternative models, you know, it's a really interesting conversation. I think it's really just starting. And so we're hearing a lot about two kind of almost anecdotal things. One is Camden, New Jersey, which abolished its police department, is the line. And the other is in Oregon, in Eugene and Springfield, there's a model called Cahoots, where the White Dove Clinic has created a series of vans and teams that respond. These are both interesting things to look at. When you take them apart, it's a lot more complicated, especially Camden, because they basically, the county, they got rid of the police department, but brought the county in. And I think 70 or 80% of the officers from the old department got hired by the county. So it's not just that they abolished the police department, but they had to find a way to really do a reset. And there's been a lot of positive around that. There have been some questions, but overall, that's an interesting model. But when we think about how do we do public safety, I guess I'll frame a couple questions, which is, what is the goal? And what's our definition of public safety? What do we want people who are doing the work of public safety to be engaged in? And really, what are the problems that we see or the concerns that we have that we want public safety to address? And we really have to ask ourselves, how much of that is policing? How much of that is enforcing the law? How much of that is first response? Like, who can get there in 2 or 3 minutes when something's happening? And then other concerns or needs, quality of life. There's kids in the park and they're keeping me up at night while I'm studying for my test, or my kids are trying to get ready for their finals, and these people are out in the front of our building making a lot of noise. There are a lot of different things that we currently ask police to do, and we do need to think about how we do that differently. And then it really comes down to, what is our vision for how we want to take care of ourselves as a society? When we think about the work of social workers and other helping professions, there's a lot that we ask them to do, but we also work hard to take care of them, and we take care of each other. And when we think about policing and law enforcement, I know this is not top of mind for a lot of people in the current moment, when we've seen, you know, time after time, Black men in particular, but lots of people from all backgrounds being killed at the hands of police. But it's important to also think about, how do we take care of law enforcement? How do we support them? How do we make sure that they have the mental health support they need? They have the tools. They're given clear direction by the community about what we want them to do, how we expect them to act. And yes, we need to hold them accountable, but we also need to support them and think about, how do we, with all the history, with all of the negativity, with all of the damage, and all of the challenges we have as a society, what do we think we need to do to respond in non-traditional ways? What can we say is something that we don't need the police to respond to? And then ultimately, what can we do to prevent the conditions that lead to police needing to respond? It's very similar to civilian oversight, where we've moved from being reactive only to, there's a complaint, let's deal with it, to what is it that we can put in place to prevent misconduct? How do we change training? What are policies? What are, again, the types of support we can do? So there's a whole lot I'd love to say, but I'm at over 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop now. I know we have some chance in the breakouts for more discussion, and hopefully this has been helpful. And I and NACOLE are here to offer guidance, support, advice. NACOLE is NACOLE, and our website is nacole.org. There's tons of information there. So thank you, and I'm going to put myself on mute. But again, I really appreciate all of you being here, and I really appreciate the work you're engaged in and all that you're going to do.
So now we'll have Ricardo Adams, who is going to help with framing the local conversation. He will also be joined by Eric Stevens as well, who should be joining in right now. So Ricardo, can you please go ahead?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm still echoing. All right. No, you gotta mute it.
I was gonna say, make sure if we all make sure we're muted, that might help.
All right. Yeah, so once again, my name is Ricardo Adams. I'm a parent of a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old daughter in Rochester City School District. One of them is right here with me. She's a strong advocate for police accountability. She was a part of the effort to get the police out of the schools. And so my whole thing is centered around the young people. When I was younger, I used to hear a story about 3 old wise men. And I used to always hear it over and over. And what that did is condition for me that it made me think that you needed to be old to be wise. And in the back of my mind, it was subliminal, but it stayed with me. And so it caused me to not really respect youths, what they bring into the table. There was a lot of things when I was young that was subliminal that stayed with me. That's in direct correlation to this police thing. Like when I went to school, the vice principal had a paddle, a big paddle, sitting in front of his door. And so you just always, when you walk by that, you would see and know that if something went wrong, this is how we was going to resolve the issue. And so that was how I looked at the police being in the school, which is not a good way for kids to think issues get resolved. I'd rather have them in the mindset of thinking that they can resolve it instead of being in a conditioned or controlled or corrupted mindset, and had a certain way of thinking that you need the police to resolve the issue. Fast forward to like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in August 9th, I went to Ferguson. As soon as it happened, I went out there. I just felt I had to go out there. And I was working with the young people out there, and after they cussed me out, then they embraced me and told me I wasn't running nothing. I wasn't leading anything, just to get and be in support. And when I did that, it was like one of the greatest learning experiences I ever had. These young people were putting everything on the line, everything, their jobs, their college careers, their housing, they put it all on the line. And they had a new technique that I've been advocating and protesting and doing rallies all over the country. Style. They got a volleyball up. They're sending out fake messages. They just had a whole different strategy, and it was effective, and it was impressive, and it made me realize that not just me, just older people in general, step aside and let these young people lead, man, because they really have a better understanding than we think they have. And I've learned that from my kids. I empower my kids. In the city of Rochester, we have a lot of old-time activists that have been around. When I say I'm talking about like 40 and over. 40 and over. It's a bunch of us that we have a lot to say. We need to be quiet. We really do. We really do. And empower these young people and let them show us the way. And this is the perfect storm, the perfect opportunity, because these systems are torn down now. we should not be doing no rebuilding because that wasn't working. Why would we build back to something that didn't work? We have to try do something new. And it don't just trying to keep the conversation on the defunding of the police, but it ain't. That's not the only system. This needs a whole new start. The school district system that I'm a part of, the housing system, all of them. We cannot be trying to rebuild this stuff. We have to start from scratch and do something different, man. And people like me, we're stuck in our ways, so we're thinking in the same pattern. We have to let these new young people come with some new ideals. I really feel strongly about that. My daughter, is Eric around?
Yes, Eric is here.
Yeah, I am right here. Hey, Luba.
No, so.
Hi, Eric.
Ricardo. So are you guys ready for?
Okay, Eric.
Yes.
Sorry, my 16-year-old son just got his permit today, and I let him drive to track practice, and it was a little bit nerve-wracking. But he did an okay job. But it's fitting that I let him drive because we have conversations about what it's like to be a young black man and driving, and just how different it is for a black man driving than for most people driving. And me and my sons, we often have those conversations. I have to prepare them on what to expect when they're pulled over for things that don't make sense. And I share some of my own stories with my sons. I remember coming back from college in Arkansas when I was 19 years old. I was driving through Buffalo, almost back to Rochester, and I got pulled over for speeding, but I knew I didn't speed. And the officer was just he was just berating me how fast were you going? I was 55 miles an hour. It was back and forth for 10 minutes. And he finally went back because I think he wanted me to admit I was going faster, but I wasn't. And he went back to his car. 20 minutes later, came back with an $85 ticket for an air freshener dangling from my window for obstruction of view. And I said, but this is what they sell them to put on your windows, for your mirrors. And so me and my sons, we've been having those kind of conversations, and I shared with them stories for many, many years. And it's led to my oldest son, Tien, really, really becoming an activist in his own right. Tien first started doing Frederick Douglass speeches when he was 7 years old. He won at the national level of Washington, D.C. And the speeches, he really, I'm sorry, Tien would really study them and really listen to the words and would just be so moved by the words that he just started becoming a social justice warrior at 10 years old, 11 years old. And it's just been encouraging for me to see him want to make a difference and to not be afraid to stand up. Now, my sons are multiracial. My wife is Chinese and Japanese American and Spanish. So my sons realize that their experience, they both go to McQuaid, now one is a freshman in college. My oldest son, Tien, realizes that his experience at McQuaid is probably different than the African-American boys that look like me are. And he's used that opportunity to fight for other students. And as a father, that makes me extremely proud to see him think like that. Tien also was really moved, I'm sure like Ricardo's daughters, he was really moved by the Rochester Black Lives Matter, their first big march where they started at MLK Park. And Tien, I was a little bit nervous of him going, not because of the rally, but because of COVID-19 and being around so many people. But he said, "Dad, I have to go." So I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to tag along with you." And so I went down there with him. I kept my distance so like he could feel like he was on his own because he's 18 and he had just completed his freshman year of college. And then all of a sudden he texts me, Dad, I'm going on the stage to speak. Someone at one of the organizers knows me from my Frederick Douglass speeches. And I got really like moved by that. He got up there as nervous as he was, speaking in front of thousands of people, sharing the words of Frederick Douglass that are as relevant today as they were in 1856 and 1860. And that was a really moving experience for him to just be a part of something like that. And Tien also is an artist. He's a singer, rapper. He wrote a song called Dear Mr. Police that talks about the interaction between Black men and police when they get pulled over. And just to see him just evolve as an activist, to see him evolve from his Frederick Douglass speeches at 7 years old at School 12 to being a leader in his school at McQuaid that's 98% white and starting the multicultural club there and leading the Mosaics work at McQuaid, to then speaking at the Black Lives Matter rally, to writing music about the conflict between police and Black men. It's just, as a father, you know, it just makes you proud to see your sons just be so involved and so in tune on what's going on. And one of the beautiful things about the Black Lives Matter rally that I remember, someone shared with us, there was an artist on Twitter named Dave, I don't remember his last name, who was inspired by Tien and drew like a cartoon, like a 4-block cartoon of Tien speaking. And someone was like, is this your son? And I was like, whoa. That's my son. So we were able to reach out to the artist and he made a couple of prints for us. So now we have that to never forget that event. But I just think it's important for, pretty much like Ricardo said, to let our sons and daughters lead. Like, I didn't tell Tien anything that he needed to do. He knew what he needed to do. Tien didn't need me to tell him what to do. And Ricardo's right. These young people, I realized that the young people were ready when the stuff that was going on in Florida, the school shooting with those teenagers. I told my wife, I was like, yo, I was sleeping on this generation. And that was a mistake because these kids are ready. These kids are ready for what's next. I was like, these kids are ready for what's next. So thank you for letting me share some of that story.
Thank you, Eric, for sharing that story, and Ricardo as well for sharing your stories. It is very important that we do allow the youth to lead. They are doing the work in our community, and sometimes we might have to step back to allow them because I think they see it differently, but they also could they have a different perspective on it. And I just think it's time that we do that. But I want to continue this conversation. I want us to get ready to get into our breakout rooms. I think that's where we'll have better conversations with one another. Welcome back, everyone, as you all should be coming back from your small group conversations. I hope you had a great conversation with one another. I know that the time it seems like it goes very quick when you're engaged and you're having this great dialogue. I always tell people, like, when we do the small groups, I think we should have a whole hour or more because we could just talk forever in that setting. And that's why, as a PLTI, we love the small group protocol because it allows you to really have that opportunity to hear and see from one another. So I know that the time went really quickly, and we will allow some time in this large group conversation for you guys to kind of continue maybe some of that convo. Eric Stevens is on here. He should be. He's going to help to debrief this conversations that you guys had. And so this will be an opportunity to have some Q&A as well, and maybe have some opportunity to share what was not shared in your small group setting. So Eric, if you're on, ready to go?
I'm on.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm sure, like many of you, like Luba said, we had some really great conversations. We talked about police, about other kind of social institutions where there's systematic racism. The conversations were deep and rich and diverse. And from what I'm seeing in the notes, you know, our group wasn't the only group. So let's hear a few thoughts from each group. I would like to ask if one representative from each group, I don't know if it's going to be Luba or Rahima, that can help me navigate that. But I would love to have each group give a quick summary, 2 to 3 minutes of what you guys talked about.
Okay, Leslie, I see that you raised your hand. Leslie Knox.
Hi, I facilitated in group 2 where we talked about community engagement and, community-led emergency response. So we bridged into a conversation of what is defunding the police. It is not in our perspective at this point, making sure that we remove all police presence and order within the community. It's more about reallocating funds for community enhancement. So Stevie Vargas brought up the point that the Rochester RPD has a budget of about 100 million. Meanwhile, the children youth services from the city has about 700,000. And when the city needed to make cuts, they weren't going to touch the police force funds, but they were really going to gut the city youth programs. That doesn't seem very beneficial. So from the perspective that, and I like the quote that Brian Corr put in the chat, if you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. This is a community, this should be a community-driven conversation. It's not about us versus them. It's about enhancing the community with funds that we reallocate from the RPD budget. RPD has gotten new cars lately. If you haven't seen them in the streets, this happens every couple of years. Meanwhile, our streets have holes in them. It's kind of a where are our priorities? There was discussion about, well, if we reallocate funds, our concerns were who would monitor the money and who would we allocate it to? What about the current agencies? Would we need to create new agencies? Would we need to create new coalitions in order to successfully get the funds where they're going? Then there is also the how do you enhance a community? That was where the really fun part of the conversation happened. I viewed it more as a stone soup kind of conversation where everyone adds their tidbits to the soup and you get something that's not planned, but nonetheless enriching, fulfilling, and nourishing. I really enjoyed our conversation. We were discussing our visions for community enhancement, which included talking about using some of the funds for community education, increasing the quantity and quality of community resources. So yes, there are community centers in the city, in places where they're needed. But if you go to David Gant Center, it does not look like the community center in Pittsburgh. Could the community center with all those resources in Pittsburgh be used where the David Gant Community Center is? Heck yes. I do believe it's more of a fudge yes, but still very strongly yes. We need to.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off, which is only that we have about 2 minutes for each group. So thank you for sharing. Does someone from another group want to share, please? Thank you, Leslie, again. Luba or Rahima, can you guys help?
Yeah, I'm seeing, if anybody in other groups would like to share, we definitely would appreciate your thoughts. It could come from one of the guests or one of the panelists.
I can share from our group. I was in the police and community relations group. We talked a lot about that the problems with police and community relations stem from institutionalized racism and oppression. Mr. McNair shared about how officers are not trained to approach Black people in a certain way, but that officers come to the job with a certain mindset. And this was shared by many people, just sort of this cultural bias that we have. We talked a lot about the need to be a part of the community, to really get door to door and understand what people's experience are, what they need. We talked a lot about people feeling silenced or their voices don't matter from people in the community, and especially from the youth, and just different ways that specifically connected communities and youth empowerment are working to give people a platform where they can share their story and advocate. And some of the listening and engaging is happening, but it seems like there's a lot more that needs to be done. And another interesting point that came up was the that there's a personal bias that comes in, but then there's also a culture of what's okay and what's not okay. So we can see this in our various systems, schools, polices, hospitals, what things are tolerated and what things are not tolerated. So while there is this sort of individual bias that people bring in, there is also a systemic piece that needs to be addressed. Did I miss anything? Anyone?
Yeah, just one last thing on that. The last thing we talked about was the need to be very explicit, again, about what's acceptable and what's not, and in particular how, to be anti-racist and all the different policies. We can't be stopped and say, the example was, these things you can stop a car for, but we also got to be explicit that you can't just stop someone because, or start making up stuff. I mean, just being firm and direct and being very anti-racist to really change things.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Is there someone else out there from another group that would like to share? Bueller.
Did you see my comment?
Good, I got someone to laugh.
Annette, I think Ricardo is nominated to talk about sharing power.
Ricardo?
Danette?
Yes, I wanted Danette talk about what she talked about sharing power, because I know about people is not going to give up their power. If they have their foot on your neck, they think if they share the power, you're going to end up putting your foot on their neck. And so it was just a very important conversation that she had brought up in our group, and I thought it would be nice if she didn't mind sharing that.
Sure, absolutely, Ricardo. Last night I was on a webinar with some folks for the Center for Racial and Urban and Racial Equity is what it is. And a gentleman by the name of Ron Hantz, who's a panelist, made the comment that really stood out to me. And he said that the biggest obstacle to change, because a lot of what we're talking about tonight and have been talking about for a long time, is conversation around equity. But in relationship to that, Simeon brought up a very important point of tying that back to economics and around how do we really link all those pieces together. And when we're talking about systemic change, obviously change is not easy, but the gentleman last night said that the biggest obstacle to change is having to give up power. And then once you give up power and you realize that you have to share the power, that's when people get scared and want to shy away from that conversation. We're all talking about equity, or all talking about systems change. How do we bring the community to the table? How do we really engage the community? But we can't talk about that without talking about power differentials, power shifts, and really looking at what are the implications related to that. And people are not so ready to give up that position, because if I give up my power, then what do I have left? Because that is what has been sustaining these systems that we're trying to disrupt. Well, actually, COVID has disrupted everything. truth be told. But now we have to go into the mode of dismantling, and that takes power and resource. And where does the power lie? We have to really look at that and really deconstruct and go from there. But until we are talking about systems change and power and equity and economics, we're still just dancing around the edges, and we got to get in. We got to put our full bodies in. No more sticking toes in, sticking one foot in. If we're really going to tackle this, it's going to take those deeper, those more uncomfortable conversations. I think everybody's got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I think, Luba, that wraps up for, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, so thank you guys for definitely being part of this. I know me and Steve are going to close out. We just definitely want to say thank you to all our panelists and our parent leader facilitators in this space. Deb Hammer has put into the chat room our event feedback survey. So if you can take the opportunity while me and Steve are closing up this event to just fill it out, we would greatly appreciate it. Also to let you know that we are going to also email you maybe in the next 20 minutes or a day, once we get settled from the Zoom world, just more information and other resources as well from this event that we have learned from this event. And so we wanted us to make sure that our goal for this event was just to make sure that you guys got a food for thought about what defunding the police was and what it meant for our community, and also calls for action individually participants can take to move forward. And we know that this is only one forum and one opportunity, and there's many, many forums going on. But we wanted to make sure that we highlight the importance of having a diverse group of people come together and sit at the table to have this type of conversation and to hear each other out through the process. I know Steve, we're planning to also continue a part 2 to this, and he can speak more to that as we close this event.
Well, thanks, Luvan. I think that power was a great way to end it, because that's really what we want to do. And you'll see that in both the survey and the email is a chance to continue to engage with both the Brockport community, specifically graduate students, as well as PLTI alumni. We really want to, after this, get you to express your interest and join us in bringing in more people to work on concrete ideas and really to advance what no one is going to give up, but that has to be taken. And so we want to march that out after this for weeks and months and years, and just continue this sustained effort with all of you and with others. So thank you. Please fill out that survey and look for that email. And we really appreciate everybody's time tonight. So have a good evening.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good evening.